from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the program. Our phone number, if you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, even if you're in one of the areas that's not so late night, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And plenty to discuss tonight. We've got a lot of really good guests coming through a little bit later. Lots of audio, lots of clips, lots of commentary. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you all. I love it when you guys chime in because that's what we're doing here, right? We're having this national conversation. And there's a bunch. I don't even know where to start. Let me see here. Hunter Biden has been found guilty on all counts. Now, we're going to spend a good amount of time on this because I think there's a lot of political discussion to be had. There's some legal analysis as well. But I think the question that presents itself here is this yet another politically motivated prosecution? Now, I know you're thinking, what do you mean, Rich? You think they're using lawfare to go after Hunter Biden too? Potentially, I think they might. I think, David Weiss had a lot to say, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But ultimately, this is the case, right? This is the one case where Hunter can get his hands dirty, take the fall, and it's got nothing to do with his dad, Joe El Baboso Biden. Nothing. Now, if he gets in trouble for the FARA registration, the Foreign Agent Registration Act stuff, where he's acting as a foreign agent and didn't register, that connects to his dad. Why? He was doing that in China. He was doing that in Ukraine. Okay. So if that's something that'll get his dad into some hot water potentially, then what about the deals that they cut or the money he's received? Same thing. So basically, if I'm a drug-addicted son and I make a mistake and throw a gun in a dumpster, then have my girlfriend take it out and put it back and whatever the case was, and get in trouble for lying on this application, and I'm found guilty on all counts, well, then guess what just happened? Obviously, I can now say the system worked. That stuff you hear Trump saying is false. They're saying I've prosecuted Trump because he's my political enemy. What do you think I did? Prosecute my son as well? Biden's got to, and if I were Biden, it's exactly what I would be saying. I would totally be out there ringing the bell for how great I am, because this is an opportunity to do that, and none of this blows back on Joe El Baboso Biden. So we're going to have that discussion a little bit later and in more depth, as well as, what this conviction looks like. I'm hearing mixed views from folks who are not lawyers but are giving their opinion on things, saying that they normally don't see people even get prosecuted for this crime. I've had other prosecutors say that they've brought this crime and it's never a probation. It's always, some sort of time served. So we're going to get to the bottom of that as well. Now, a little bit more. Let's see. You had Hunter Biden being found guilty on the charges of felony gun charges, while Joe Biden is hosting a gun control event just a couple hours later. That's pretty funny. And what else do we have here? There's now mounting evidence that Joe Biden's executive order at the border is not slowing down the flow of illegal immigration. In fact, it's not doing anything. And that's problematic. And we got into some depth with that topic last night with our guest, Victor Avila. But I've got to tell you, this is something that Trump called right away, and I think he was right. I think this is very similar to the James Langford bill that had these artificial numbers in them, where if you hit this much, then we do this, and if you have this and we do that, we're going to lower it to $5,000 a day or $2,500 a day. Crazy. You don't stop crime by reducing crime. I think it's clear. So anyway, that's that. And then we've got something for my New Yorkers out there. You guys may know who Kobayashi is, and if you don't, he was for a while the hot dog eating champion in the Nathan's hot dog eating competition at Coney Island in Brooklyn, New York. And then he was defeated by Joey Chestnut, who's reigning champ multiple years in a row. Well, Joey Chestnut will not compete in this year's hot dog eating contest over branding disputes. So, sorry, Joey Chestnut, because the guy really is a champ. You got to see him, gobble those glizzies. He puts them away. He really does. It's just amazing how they do it. Kobayashi was more of a tactician, where he would dunk the bread in the water to make it kind of more soluble, and then jam that down his throat while breaking up the hot dog and chewing it very quickly. These competitive eaters are really something. My buddy Curtis Sliwa, who has been a mentor as well as John Batchelor and the great one Mark Levin, he once competed in the Nathan's hot dog eating competition and came in number 2. So the next time we have Curtis Sliwa on, you got to remind me to mention that. Anyway, so those are some of the things we're going to talk about. Then, believe it or not, there's a story out there that I want to get into a little bit. And it's really a segue to the larger story about compatibility between significant others. But there's one that says, they're putting some validity into how compatible you are with your mate by looking at how compatible you are with your cars. So I'm going to break that down for you probably at the top of the next hour. And again, not because I think it's a dire breaking news event, but because I think anything that has to do with relationships, I think, is an important thing. Ultimately, we watch TV all day, whether it's reality TV or it's, the news or whatever it is. And you can be entertained, you can be informed, you can be lots of things. But in real life, you have to deal with people. And when you're dealing with people, you got to know what you're doing. And some people have a higher degree of emotional intelligence than others. I tend to be pretty comfortable on the radio and a microphone in the studio with, a handful of people working. And I can also do well in front of a big crowd giving a speech. But put me in that same room with that same crowd, networking, let's say, and not as comfortable. I don't love floating around a room and shaking 4,000 hands. I don't mind it per se. I'm just not as good at it as I am the other stuff. Right, I have to put thought into it. I have to remember people's names. I have to, I have to control my mind because I can tend to get very distracted. People are telling me, "Oh yeah, I'm from here. I do this, I do that," and I'm thinking, "Oh man, I got to put this thing in the mail. I got to do." It's the ADHD. It just gets the better of me. Anyway, I brought all of that up to say that we're gonna have a really good show for you tonight. That was my ADHD moment. And I want to give you the phone number if you want to chime in on the Hunter Biden stuff. We're going to be discussing that with a former district attorney, a former prosecutor, and who is an expert in gun law, the Second Amendment in particular. So we'll talk about that. I also have some audio from David Weiss, who took his victory lap, or not so much of a victory lap, depending on how which side of the coin you prefer. And we'll get to that as well straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
There have been 2 overarching themes emphasized by the prosecution during trial: this defendant's illegal choices and the rule of law. First, while there has been much testimony about the defendant's abuse of drugs and alcohol, Ultimately, this case was not just about addiction, a disease that haunts families across the United States, including Hunter Biden's family. This case was about the illegal choices defendant made while in the throes of addiction, his choice to lie on a government form when he bought a gun, and the choice to then possess that gun. It was these choices and the combination of guns and drugs that made his conduct dangerous. Second, no one in this country is above the law. Everyone must be accountable for their actions, even this defendant. However, Hunter Biden should be no more accountable than any other citizen convicted of this same conduct. The prosecution has been and will continue to be committed to this principle and to the principles of federal prosecution in carrying out its responsibilities.
That is David Weiss. He's the special counsel that was selected by President Joe El Baboso Biden and approved by the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, to prosecute Hunter Biden in this particular case. And he says that this case wasn't just about addiction. It was about illegal choices because of addiction. And you could see how both the special counsel is trying to frame it. Later on, I'll show you how the media is trying to frame it. And it's clear to me from the political perspective that this is going to be an attempt to legitimize whatever happens to Trump, irrespective of whatever happens on his appeals, to say exactly what he said, that everybody is accountable to justice, that no one is above the rule of law. That includes Mr. Trump, that includes Mr. Biden, and everything is fair. If we can prosecute and find guilty on felony gun charges the son of the President of the United States, then of course we can also do that to a former president, and everything is hunky-dory. The system is working, and everything is outstanding. Whether that's true or not, that's the message that's being sent. And I think it's being sent very loudly and very clearly, and I think many people are going to buy it hook, line, and sinker. Anyway, I want to get to the bottom of that with somebody who's not going to give us the politics of it, but that's going to give us the legality of it. And that's Michael McCoy. He's director of the Center to Keep and Bear Arms at Mountain States Legal Foundation. And he's been all over the place. He's served as a judge advocate general. He's an officer in the Air Force, lieutenant colonel. He also, as a JAG, was prosecuting Saddam Hussein and others in the in Iraq during the Iraq War and the subsequent time after that. He's also been an assistant United States attorney for the Central District of Illinois, as well as in California, in Eastern District of California, in Sacramento. And he was a county prosecutor as well as district attorney, assistant district attorney. And I want to welcome him to the program. Michael McCoy, welcome, sir.
Hey, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So I want you to walk us through this, and I'm open to your professional opinion. I've spoken with other former AUSAs saying that this type of crime is typically prosecuted, and they don't usually give probation, but it wouldn't be outside of the realm of reality if Hunter Biden didn't get any jail time. But that most people do. I've heard others say that this doesn't even get prosecuted. This is one of those things most people just, they get warned, or it's not even pursued. So what's your take on that and your reaction to the audio you just heard as well?
Well, these types of crimes do get prosecuted. What might be unusual about them is this particular case is that they're typically connected to some other underlying offense. So, for example, when I was in AUSA, I would frequently charge a version of this crime. It was usually felon possession, not addict in possession of a firearm. But it was connected to, for instance, a drug trafficking charge, or as a county prosecutor, it would be connected to a domestic violence-related charge. So the fact that these are standalone charges is somewhat unusual, but it's not unprecedented. And quite frankly, the law is set up in a way, whether you agree with it or not, that allows you to prosecute addicts who are in possession of a firearm. So that's one of the charges here. The other two charges are connected to him lying on his background form check, which is the ATF form 4473. So sort of two different tracks of crime. One is lying on that paperwork. The other one is possessing a firearm as an addict or someone addicted to illegal narcotics.
Now, in your professional opinion, having brought these charges against others and prosecuted these types of cases in the past, do you think everything seemed on the level? It seemed to be concluded very expeditiously. I don't know if these cases really drag out, if there's additional charges. Does the outcome of the trial surprise you, or does it seem normal?
No, I think the case was prosecuted very, very well. I paid attention to it. Obviously, the prosecution put on a great case, a string of witnesses who basically told a story of addiction on and before and after October 12th of 2018, when Hunter Biden purchased this firearm. And so they put on a very solid case. And the witness testimony was backed up by documentary evidence, by text message evidence, by video evidence. And on top of that, it was corroborated by the defendant's own words, right? Hunter Biden's memoir, his audiobook of his memoir, Beautiful Things, in it, his own words were used against him because he talked about his addiction. He talked about going to rehab for 11 days. And anyone who has either suffered with an addiction or knows someone who has knows that one of the first steps in a treatment program like that is identifying the fact that you're an addict. And so he had just finished 11 days. I'm not sure why it was so brief, but just finished 11 days at a treatment center in California right before he purchased this gun and was asked the question, are you an addict? He knew he was an addict, number one. The evidence seems to establish that pretty conclusively. But on top of that, he was actively seeking and acquiring drugs in the days leading up to this event and the days that followed this event. And that was established through witness testimony as well as text message evidence. So this was a very solid case. It was presented very well. The only thing I was concerned about, quite frankly, was not whether or not there was enough evidence to convict. I was concerned that the jury, we have a thing called jury nullification, which for those in your audience might not know what that is. It's when the jury believes there's enough evidence to convict, but decide that they don't want to because of political bias or sympathy for the defendant. I was worried that might be the result here, but it clearly wasn't. The jury, it takes usually an hour for the jury to pick their foreperson. It takes an hour for them to have lunch or breakfast, whatever it might be. And so it looks like in reality, their deliberations were probably far less than 3 hours, and they probably went right to the guilty verdicts within the first vote or maybe two. There's some discussion that they were split initially, but it doesn't look like they had to go through too many votes before they reached an agreement that conviction was appropriate.
All right. And Michael McCoy is our guest. Again, he is an attorney with a lot of experience, both as a prosecutor and now with the Mountain States Legal Foundation as director of the Center to Keep and Bear Arms. Michael McCoy, we only have a half a minute left in this segment, but when we come back, I want you to tell us a little bit about what you think the sentencing is going to look like for a case like this. But until we return, let everybody know how they can find you and follow you online.
Yeah, you can find out more information about the Center to Keep and Bear Arms as well as Mountain States Legal Foundation online at mslegal.org. And we're there really to represent the little guy against the Goliath of state and federal government when we think that they're being too intrusive or in some way violating their constitutional rights.
Outstanding. All right, folks, we're coming right back. Our guest is Michael McCoy. If you want to join the conversation on Hunter Biden, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
You're changing the nation. You really are. You're changing the nation. It builds upon the dozen of executive actions my administration has taken to reduce gun violence, more than any of my predecessors, and I suspect more than all of them combined. Everything from cracking down on ghost guns, gun trafficking, and so much more. Folks, we're not stopping there. It's time, once again, to do what I did when I was a senator. Ban assault weapons. I mean it. Thank you. needs a magazine which can hold 200 shells? Nobody, that's right. I remember when I was campaigning, when I was a senator, going through the wetlands of Delaware to meet all the people who were most upset with me, the fishermen and the hunters. And I came across a guy who was fishing, and he said, "You want to take my gun?" And I looked at him, I said, "Yeah, I don't want to take your gun. You're allowed to have a gun, but I want to take away your ability to use an assault weapon." And this is how the conversation went. He said, "What do you mean I need that gun?" I said, "Guess what? If you need 12 to 100 bullets in a gun and a magazine, you're the lousiest shot I've ever heard of."
That is Joe El Baboso Biden, the president of the United States, in D.C. at Everytown for Gun Safety's Gun Sense University conference today, pounding his chest and the point that we should ban assault weapons, which are, as far as I know, actually banned. And the fact that he's making the case that if you need more than 12 bullets, you're a lousy shot, I say, why should the government determine how many bullets I have? But this is what Joe Biden was doing while his son was being found guilty of 3 felony gun charges. And I want to get into the sentencing of the Hunter Biden case and what we can expect moving forward. And I want to get reaction to this audio clip from our guest, Michael McCoy, former prosecutor and director of the Center to Keep and Bear Arms at Mountain States Legal Foundation. Michael McCoy, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Now, you heard the president talking about taking people's ammunition away, and I think that's always been a underhanded way to kind of skirt the Second Amendment, saying, "No, you have a right to keep and bear arms. Sure, keep your gun. I'm just going to take your bullets." And it's clever, but it seems underhanded. What say you?
I agree. I mean, the fundamental purpose, that the reason the founders put that in, without getting into a history lesson here, but I think history is always a critical component of any Second Amendment conversation, is that it's for self-defense, right? It's for defense of yourself and your family, but it's also for defense against tyranny. That was the whole point. The American people had risen up against the most powerful empire in the world at that point, the British Empire, and overthrew it because it had become tyrannical. And they did this not with a standing army, although they acquired one obviously during the course of the war, but with common-day Americans grabbing their muskets, grabbing the weapons, the firearms they had, and using them to fight. And so that's what they envisioned. They saw that might become a time in the future where the government becomes tyrannical yet again. And the ability of the Americans to defend themselves against that tyranny is the central component of the Second Amendment. And so when I hear these conversations, it's not about hunting. I mean, clearly that's a side product of having a firearm for those who want to hunt, but that's not the point of the Second Amendment. The point is defense against tyranny, and it's not being taught in schools. It's not being taught to Americans, and it's intentional, in my opinion, to try to make people think that this is a second-rate right. It's not a second-rate right. It's the Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights for a reason, because the founders thought it was so important to include it in there. So, anyways, that's my rant on the Second Amendment. But I think
that's good historical context, and I do appreciate it. And I think my follow-up to that is, does the government's move to limit the amount of bullets that you can have, does that infringe on my Second Amendment right?
Yes, I would say so, because, again, it's not just the ability to possess a firearm. It's the ability to be able to use it in the manner in which you desire to use it in. And so when they use the term assault weapons, that's a loose term that's basically applied to any could be applied to any firearm that delivers or has the capacity to deliver a certain number of rounds of ammunition, or it has a certain number of rounds of ammunition in the magazine, for example, in a rifle situation. So, that's a loose term that's applied to basically big, scary guns. That's what the left uses to describe that. There's really it's an amorphous definition that they like to apply to big, scary guns. What they want to do is take those big, scary guns away from Americans and their ability to have them. There's also efforts, and there has been efforts in the past, to take away handguns from Americans. So if you're taking away rifles and you're taking away handguns, what are we left with? And they're basically trying to carve out the Second Amendment piece by piece until it has no real effect or meaning. And ultimately, when you disarm an entire group of Americans, when you disarm all Americans, there is no check on the government, no check whatsoever, and it can grow without any threat of any kind of uprising from the people in the future.
Well, and that's I think the concern, right? And I live in New Jersey now, and in New Jersey, just a few years ago, we went from 15 rounds in the magazine to 10, right? So you lost a third. And many argued this is unconstitutional, but that's still the case. How does one have a defense? Because I'm feeling like it's only a matter of time before Governor Murphy comes around and says, you know what, we're going to cut that in half again. We're going to give you 5 rounds. So I'm thinking, a 9mm with 5 rounds in it, an AR-15 with 5 rounds in it, where, I don't know, our neighboring Pennsylvania, you can have 30 rounds. And it just seems inconsistent and unfair. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. And I would say this, Rich, the difference now is that we have the Bruen decision.
Right.
I'm sure you're familiar with it. I'm not sure if your viewers, all of your listeners are familiar with it. But basically, we have a very good Supreme Court right now when it comes to Second Amendment rights. And through a series of decisions over the last 15 years, starting with Heller, which shot down the DC's ban on handguns, and then on to Bruen, in which basically shot down the restriction on people being able to have CCWs in New York City. There is now new case law precedent, which will make it difficult for the governor of New Jersey to do that, because now the new sort of way in which Second Amendment cases are reviewed is not under, hey, is there a legitimate government purpose for restricting the amount of ammunition in a particular magazine? It's, is there a historical analog for this restriction? Meaning, did the founders anticipate, or in some way would they have embraced this type of restriction on a person's right to keep and bear arms? And if the government can't point to a specific historical analog, a specific example of that, then guess what? That law will not stand. However, I say that's the new precedent. We now have courts, district courts, as well as even appellate courts, that are actively snubbing their nose at the Supreme Court's decision in Bruen. They're scoffing at it at the very least, and sometimes basically saying we're not going to follow it, or they're grasping at straws to say, hey, well, there's this historical analog from England from the 15th century, which the founders would have had knowledge of, and in essence, that's the thing that explains or justifies this type of restriction. Whether it's a waiting period, whether it's a ban on pistol braces, whether it's a ban on the amount of rounds of ammunition you can have in a magazine, et cetera, et cetera. And so they're grasping at straws. They're trying to push back on Bruen. But be happy and grateful that we have the Supreme Court we have right now. That's why this next election is so important. It always is important because, we want to maintain a pro-Second Amendment Supreme Court. And right now we have that for sure.
Michael McCoy. Now, again, for a guy like me or anybody else who's listening who feels like they're in an oppressive state, if I want to go and apply for a concealed carry permit in New Jersey after Bruen, that's now allowed. But they have a lot of hoops you have to jump through. I have to get a separate insurance policy. I can't carry without an insurance policy, all sorts of stuff. And they're trying to make it as restrictive as possible, despite the ruling that, kind of clearly defined not to be restrictive in a case like this. What is, do I have any reprieve? Does anybody have any recourse in moving forward? Does everybody have to go and sue the government in order to do that now?
Yeah, they kind of do. I hate to say that. I mean, that's the point of organizations like mine, like Mountain States. Before the break, I said, we're there to represent the little guy against Goliath, whether that's your state or federal government. And so these laws, just because Bruen happened, it didn't automatically overturn these laws that have been on the books in some cases for decades. Each of those laws now has to be challenged. For example, we're challenging some laws here in California, or part of cases that are challenging laws here in California that have stood for 20 years, and now because of Bruen, we're saying, we need to revisit this issue all over again. But does it take a lawsuit? Typically it does. The thing about Mountain States and the thing about other organizations like ours is that we represent you pro bono. So it doesn't cost you anything, but it is a multi-year commitment to being engaged in the fight against either your state or federal government on a particular issue. So it really is just people coming to us and saying, this is something I can't tolerate anymore, whether it's Second Amendment, whether it's a First Amendment issue, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And, if we're able to take the case, and we can only take so many cases, obviously, we're just a few attorneys in an office. But if we take the case, then we push back as hard as we can to try to get that law overturned, if possible.
Standing up for the little guy. I love that. Michael McCoy, stick with me. I wanted to still get your analysis on what you believe will happen with the sentencing in the Hunter Biden case coming up straight ahead. Folks, we're coming right back with our guest from Mountain States Legal Foundation, Michael McCoy, director of the Center to Keep and Bear Arms.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. No hair, no care, and live on the air, it's Rich Valdez.
Reminds us that for all of the major implications of the first conviction of the child of a president, this trial inside the courtroom, like virtually every criminal trial, was a personal story, a personal tragedy, a family tragedy. The guilty verdicts that the jury has handed down on Hunter Biden were verdicts not just on his conduct under law, but on his collapse into drug addiction and the consequences of it. So many American families understand that, and now the first family has gone through it as well. The political consequences of it may be tempered by the fact that this is a scourge that has touched so many American families, even the president's.
That's Terry Moran with ABC News, again, giving some color to the notion that this is about addiction, not about lying on a gun application. And I think that is going to cause an empathetic response to the sentencing. I could be wrong. Let's go to our resident expert today, Michael McCoy from Mountain States Legal Foundation. What do you think happens with this case?
Well, I think, if he had accepted responsibility and pled out, and I won't go into a discussion about the plea agreement that fell apart, but if he had done that on these particular charges, he would be facing undoubtedly a probation term, because there's a thing in the federal sentencing guidelines. It's literally a chart that, you look at his criminal history and you look at the amount of points he gets given the type of offense it is, and would have put him in a category that would have made probation pretty likely. Because he did not accept responsibility, because this went to a trial, he's bumped into the next category, where probation is not a guarantee for sure. Although he's facing up statutorily, he's facing up to 25 years in prison. No one gets the stat max, or very rarely does that happen. What he's facing guideline range is somewhere about 10 to 16 months, basically a half of a year to a year and a half in custody, potentially. But I think kind of the sympathy that you referenced, Rich, is going to play in here, even with this judge. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a straight probation term out of this case. The bigger case heading his way, though, and where I think probation is probably not as likely, is the tax case that's coming up in a few months. But that's a separate issue I won't get into right now. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, and there's also discussion about a Foreign Agent Registration Act violation that may or may not be a thing. Do you think that materializes?
It might. I mean, that's an issue that's particularly kind of taken headlines this week too, based on the congressional inquiry. The tax case itself is kind of somewhat related to that, in the sense that he was acquiring all this money from the Ukrainian gas company, from the Chinese power company in China, and not reporting it. Now, the defense is going to play an interesting switch here, because in the tax case, they're going to say, oh, he was an addict at this time. And at that period of time, the period of time where he bought the gun specifically, he was absolutely an addict at that period of time. He was absolutely incapable of making good decisions regarding tax filing and tax decisions, because he was so addicted to crack. And that's why he can't be found guilty of these tax crimes, because he didn't form the requisite intent. I mean, they're going to switch the game over with that case in California.
So it seems like this really was the best case for him to have to face first, and it may pave the way for the rest of them to be very, very sympathetic towards him.
It might, and the jury in the next case will be instructed not to take any knowledge or bias they may have based on this conviction into the deliberation room with them. But it always plays a part. I mean, and keep in mind, Rich, there was a plea agreement on the table, last June or whenever that was, that would have resolved all these cases, the gun cases as well as the tax case. And it fell apart, largely because Hunter wanted immunity from not only those crimes, but pretty much any potential crime he had committed
ever
from that period of time, ever, which no prosecutor would agree to. And so that fell apart. In hindsight, for him, and not hindsight for me, I would have said you should have gone forward with that deal, dude, because he, rather than facing the felony tax charges and the felony gun charges, he was facing misdemeanor tax charges that he would plead to, and the gun charge would be sort of held in abeyance until he made it through 2 years of diversion. And if he kept his nose clean during that period of time, that charge would have gone away completely. And so he would have ended up as convicted of a misdemeanor tax case. Now he has the likelihood, quite frankly, of being convicted of this tax case as well as the conviction he just got today. So twice convicted felon.
Everybody's a convicted felon nowadays. Michael McCoy. Let's remind everybody how they can follow the work that you're doing, and of course I'm writing this down, so when I go and apply for my concealed carry and they give me a hard time, I'm calling you first.
All right, appreciate it. Yeah, I'm with the Mountain States Legal Foundation. We're centered in Denver, but we cover pretty much the entire country. And if you want to reach us or you want to basically make a claim and let us know about something, a constitutional violation you think is occurring, you can reach us through our website, which is mslegal.org. It's M as in Mary, M as in Mountain, and S as in States, legal.org.
Outstanding. Great conversation. I appreciate it. You are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I thank you for being with us. Godspeed, Michael McCoy.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Folks, we're coming right back. Your calls, more commentary, and a whole lot more before we get into the next hour of the program. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
This verdict certainly flies in the face of everything that the former president has been pushing, trying to undermine the legal and the justice system. And we know President Biden has come out very strongly against that. And it was notable that he told you just days ago that he would respect the outcome of this verdict regardless of what happens. We know that is something that the former president has not done after he was found guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records and that hush money trial there in Manhattan. We know he has tried to undermine the justice system entirely.
Oh, stop. This is just amazing. And again, this is why we have to do what we do, right? This is why I have a job and I get to come out here and look at this stuff every day and decipher it and give you my opinion on it. Because she just said that President Trump has tried to undermine the legal system every step of the way. Meanwhile, I saw a guy that was minding his own business and was charged by the government. The legal system came after him, saying you did this, and in every case, it was outside of the statute of limitations. X, Y, and Z prosecutor passed on it, yada, 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 right? So for her to suggest that Trump is, flouting the system, no. It's the system coming after him, at least in my opinion it is. Anyway, folks, we continue our conversation about compatibility with your spouse, your partner, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 2 of our program, and good evening. It is Tuesday night. If you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833, the number 4, followed by my last name, Valdez, and that's Valdez with an S. And I want to talk about a few things. Obviously, the big story today, Hunter Biden has been convicted, found guilty on all 3 felony gun charges that he was facing. We had some very in-depth discussion on that in the last hour. We'll continue to keep you up to speed on what, any developments that occur there. I doubt there'll be any overnight, but you never know. It's Hunter Biden we're talking about here. Of course, Joe Biden was on the road speaking at a anti-gun event just shortly after the conviction and after his now famous hug of his son on the tarmac, which is very nice, very endearing, honestly. And let's see what else we've got here. We've got, there's a clip. I wanted to play this yesterday, and I just didn't get to it. But there's a newly released video of January 6th footage that shows Nancy Pelosi admitting that she was responsible for not having the National Guard at the Capitol. So we'll definitely get into that in a little bit, maybe at the top of the next hour. So make sure you keep it locked right here with me. And let me see. There was something else I wanted to cover before getting into this stuff. Oh, yeah. There's a book out. Let me see what the name of the book is. I don't have it in front of me. But this book, here it is. False Flag, Why Queer Politics Mean the End of America. We'll begin talking about that in the next half hour. So that should be interesting. It's Pride Month, and I want to see how they think this is going to end America. But right now, I want to direct your attention to this clip I have from Buzz 60. That's the outlet that produced this. And it's regarding a recent study that looks at the compatibility of cars. Listen to this.
Are you car incompatible with your spouse or partner? A new study shows that 1 in 4 Americans say they are. What exactly is car incompatible? Well, it means you and your significant other have different ideas on how to use and treat the vehicle you drive. The research, commissioned by Mazda and conducted by Talker Research, found that 45% of couples admit they argue over a shared vehicle, and 28% have gotten into disagreements and arguments specifically over how the car's settings are adjusted. That's pretty tense considering the study found that the average couple shares a vehicle 8 times per month. Many say they reward their spouse for properly readjusting vehicle settings after driving it by cleaning the vehicle once a week or even taking them out on a romantic dinner date.
Now, this is something you'd think, is this late breaking news? No, it's not, but this is interesting to me. And the reason why is because I'm thinking, look, I was a small business owner, but I was on the grind, right? I wasn't making a ton of money when I was first married in my 20s. And I can tell you that even then, I think very, very rarely did I share a car with my wife. We bought a brand new car. We had one car that we made payments on, and then we bought another hoopty. And that was my car. And I drove around in that until, I made a different move. But that was kind of how it worked. And we always had 2 cars because, we needed 2 cars, I felt. And I would totally be car incompatible with, I would say, just about anybody because I don't like to share. I don't want to share my car. It's kind of like my sanctuary, my oasis. I get into my car and I get to listen to whatever I want. I have all my preset stations. So if I'm in a talk radio kind of mood, I listen to talk radio. And even that mood can go in different directions, right? I could decide I want to listen to left-leaning talk radio like NPR or maybe something more conservative like the great one, Mark Levin. And whatever it is that I decide to listen to, I want to listen to. I don't want to get in the car and hear someone else's music, someone else's station. Now, also the way I keep my mirrors in my chair. Now, my car has a couple of settings for that, so I'm driver 1, and there is no driver 2. But if there was, it would know, and it recognizes the key fob. So I think that's one way to solve that problem. But I want to get into that, and really the bigger issue here is car compatibility, I think, can really, in many ways, translate into incompatibility in real life, or maybe not. And I want to talk to somebody who's a pro, and that is our buddy, Dr. Vince Callahan. He's the founder of the Florida Institute for Neural Discovery, FIND. That's in Florida, and their website, again, is find-fl.com or drvincecallahan.com. Dr. Vince Callahan, welcome back, sir.
Thank you for having me. I love being on your show.
Thank you, sir. You're one of my favorites here. You really are. Now, I'm looking at this stuff here. It says 1 in 4 Americans consider themselves car incompatible with their spouses or partners, and that's according to this new study. And it finds that 10% of men would consider it a deal breaker if they weren't car compatible. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are this one hits too close to home for me because my ex used to literally blow the horn when I was driving.
Mine too.
She would reach across and blow the horn if she thought it needed to be blown. Not cool. You can't invade that invisible cone that's, around the driver. You can't do that. But I read the study, and what sticks out to me is the petty things that they could get upset about. The seat settings and the music settings and the AC settings and those things that are small in nature but could turn into an argument or turn into something major. That to me speaks great volumes of the condition of the relationship.
I agree. And I think ultimately, relationships are one of those things that are, in my opinion, they're intricate, but they're simple, right? They're simple when you're looking at someone else's. They're intricate when it's your own. And the bottom line is always, I think, kind of thinking back, why do I like this person to begin with? Why am I in love with this person? Why did I marry this person? Whatever your situation is. And reminding yourself that you want to have some sort of mutually beneficial outcome here, some solution that benefits to both of you as a team, as a group, as a united front, not one where you win or they win, because then it becomes adversarial. But again, very easy to forget when you're on the inside looking out.
Right. And if you're going to argue about a setting in a car, that tells me that relationship could be in trouble, that there's too much tension going on. And I'm going to start asking some questions if I'm talking to those people, like, when was the last time you kissed your spouse? You'd be surprised how many people that I ask that question to, when was the last time you kissed your spouse? They'll say, oh, a week ago, month ago. It wasn't today. And that's when I give them my card and say, I think you need to call me or talk to me because I think you guys might be in trouble. And so in this car incompatibility thing, if you can't ride together and have fun and enjoy that or switch off, maybe it wouldn't, the relationship might not work, but I don't know that that's the greatest indicator of not having that relationship work for long term. But how you deal with things and how you problem solve and how you have discussions about things, that's the greater picture. And to me, that's what you've got to work on the most in any relationship is how do we problem solve, how do we get our point across, and how do we connect with one another.
Now, in a situation like this where you would have someone, I'll use me for an example, right? I know if it were me and I would say, all right, yeah, I'm not using the car. I don't drive a lot. And let's say, my wife were to go, or my girlfriend or whomever were to say, okay, I'm going to go shopping. And they take the car and they don't use the little cool button that I have that says driver 1 or driver 2. And they leave their setting, and I get in. I hit my head on the way into the car because the seat's too far up and the steering wheel's not where I left it. And I say, hey, look, do me a favor. When you get in the car, just always put it back. Hit your button and try to reset it to mine because I want to get in there and make sure I fit when I get in there, and I don't want to hit my head. And they turn around and say, well, then just hit the driver 1 button when you get in there. I'm not going to remember to do that every time. And now it becomes adversarial, and all the advice I was just giving you before kind of goes out the window. How do you, to couples that are going through things like that, or with any topic, whether it's a car or anything else, how do you recommend they approach a situation like that?
Well, I'll take what you were saying in the beginning there. If that seat is where you're going to hit your head and it's not adjusted, I'm going to say to my spouse, you know what, when I get in the car after you, I hit my head, it hurts, and I know it's not a big deal, but could you please remember to push that button so that I don't, go through that pain, so to speak. If I tell my wife what I need from her to do and she blows it off and doesn't pay attention to it, then how concerned is she really about my needs being met? And that's right. What that really says to me. So if you can't be concerned about the little things, and if you can't do those little things that your spouse needs, then again, the relationship is in trouble because you're not caring, you're not showing love to that person, you're not meeting their needs in that relationship, and you're headed down a path that's selfish and self-centered, and will always have two cars and never drive together.
Dr. Vince Callahan, with a situation like that, do you recommend that this couple goes to counseling or that they pursue, and again, it could be any number of things. I can think of things that I argue about that are insignificant, but they matter, right? Because ultimately, that's the outcome, right? Let's say I want to open a door for you, or for my girlfriend, I want to open a door for her. I want to pull out a chair for her, and I don't mind doing that. But when I open the door, she just keeps walking. So I don't walk in holding her hand or anything. She's 6 feet ahead of me, and she's talking to the maitre d', asking for a table for two, doing all the things that I traditionally would normally do. And let's say I voice this concern, and it falls on deaf ears. Ultimately, get to a place where you say, well, I'm not really interested in this anymore because I feel like you're disregarding my requests, and I take this as an act of or a lack of respect. That may be an overreaction on my part, but I could see a lot of guys reacting the same way. Does that mean everybody's doomed? Does it mean that they move forward with more conversation? What's the outcome for something like that?
It's more conversation. It's, I need you to hear me. I need you to hear what I'm saying, and I need you to hear my heart. And what I try and teach couples is to use those two simple words, I need. If I come at you and I say, why don't you do this and why don't you do that and would you, and all that kind of stuff, most people put their shields up when they feel attacked. So if I start the conversation with, I need you to hear me. Here is an issue that I need to talk to you about. Most people can do that. They can stop their life long enough and they can have that kind of conversation. When you get to the place where those things don't matter anymore, like if I don't care whether you're hurt or not, or if I don't miss you, if I don't miss the connection that we used to have, when you get to that place where you're not missing it, that's when the relationship is in real trouble, and that's when you need to get somebody like me, a third person, involved into it so that you can get some help.
All right, folks, we're on with Dr. Vince Callahan. He's the founder of FindFL.com, drvincecallahan.com. We're coming right back, and we're going to talk about marriage, the decline in marriage in some ethnic groups more than others, and how that could ultimately lead to the downfall of society, according to one researcher. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
It seems to me that our women today would rather have a baby than be married. That's jacked up. This is an existential crisis, the Black family. exacerbated by negative black male-female relationships, and the concept of marriage in our culture is in ruins, down from 85% when I was a kid in the 60s to 34% now, and projected to be about 18% if nothing changes, if we don't fix it in the next 20 years. There is no culture that has ever risen to maximize their full cultural and human potential without family being at the center of that culture. That is not possible. We must fix this.
That's Dr. George Fraser. He is a researcher and author on this topic, specializing on the black family. But what he's talking about is not unique to the black family, although they may be leading the way with this statistic. I think this is plaguing families across the board. I want to bring back our guest, a regular here on our program and one of our favorites, Dr. Vince Callahan, founder of the Florida Institute for Neural Discovery. When you hear Dr. Fraser's comments on the black family in particular in crisis, what are your thoughts?
I agree with what he's saying 100%. And what we have really going on in our society, most people right now, when they get in a committed relationship, they live together for many years to, quote, see if it's going to be like a marriage and it's going to be okay. And then they have no invested interest, to quote, get married, or if they do, it's 10 years after the fact and they may or may not make it. So marriage is in a major decline, which means to me that the family unit is in decline. And that's the first part of society that goes, and we get in trouble if that family unit begins to be destroyed. We have a fatherless society. We don't have a lot of men who are real fathers and real dads, which is very sad and shameful. If I'm old-fashioned, and I may get lots of hate mail for this, but if you can sleep with somebody, you can marry him. That's just my personal opinion, that if you're going to be that intimate, why not get married?
Dr. Vince Callahan, what is the detriment from your perspective as a therapist, as a psychotherapist, someone who's dealt with this on multiple levels, when this fatherless society that you're talking about, this epidemic of not having a dad in the home?
Well, what you have is you have kids who, we know we've got the electronic devices that are being the parents, but when you have either divorced family, we're back and forth the two homes, or we don't have a dad in the picture, there are things that dads can say and do that nobody else can do in a family. And when you don't have that, level of attachment, what you have in the child is low self-esteem, low self-image, lack of confidence. You have a lot of emotional and psychological problems that stem 100% from the fact that there's no dad in the home.
When you say emotional problems, is that like a lot of emotions, too many emotions, or not enough emotions, or both?
That's the inability to deal with the emotions and the inability to navigate life in a healthy manner, and it turns into major depression, anxiety, and other psychiatric disorders. And all that stems from the fact there's no dad in the home.
Dr. Vince Callahan, I could talk to you for hours, and we will do it again real soon. Folks, check him out at drvincecallahan.com. He's the founder of the Florida Institute for Neural Discovery. Sir, you're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
You bet. All right, folks, we're coming right back, and we're going to discuss the latest book on the LGBTQ community. Don't go anywhere.
Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And being that it's Pride Month, at least that's what I was told, there's a couple of stories I want to get to on this. I don't know which one to start with. So in my mind, I'm going to do rock, paper, scissors. And I'm going to go with this. Queer Liberation Library offers free LGBTQ books in response to the wave of school bans. This is NBC News reporting. 9 volunteers are ensuring anyone in the U.S. has access over to 1,200 books with LGBTQ themes and authors, which in many ways can be translated into porn, right, or smut. And I'm not poo-pooing porn and smut. I'm just saying it's not something that I was able to access when I was in high school, so I think we should keep that standard. But listen to this. There is a QLL, Queer Liberation Library, started by a team of 9 volunteers back in November to fill the queer literature gap amid a wave of state laws and school policy changes that are challenging books with LGBTQ themes. To check out a digital book, all readers need to do is provide their name and U.S. mailing address, all information that QLL will keep private and secure, and they're granted access to the QLL catalog via Libby, digital library. It was one of the things that came about with an idea from the Brooklyn Public Library, which is the library I started going to as a kid. I was probably 6, 7 years old. And they offer a free digital access to their entire collection nationwide. So QLL wants to be one of the few services specifically curating books with queer themes or written by queer authors. In its first few months, QLL has already attracted nearly 4,000 readers. Today it boasts a readership exceeding 50,000. I got to tell you, I am not opposed to this at all. I think it's great if you take your books that don't belong, that talk about sexuality or sexualizing children, get them out of the public school. And if you want to have a library on your own that you fund, that you do whatever you do with, then go right ahead and do it. And if it becomes a problem, we'll handle it then. But it's not a taxpayer issue. It's not something that we've done as a society saying, we're going to do this. No, we're going to respect our children. We're going to respect our families. We're going to allow them to raise their kids the way they want to, devoid of any talk about attraction and sexuality. I think that's fair for 3rd graders, for 2nd graders, for kindergartners, for 4th and 5th graders. I mean, I think it's fair straight through high school. That wasn't any of that conversation that I had in high school wasn't coming from my teachers or my librarian. It was me, my buddies, the locker room, the lunchroom, right? That's what it was. It wasn't anything that was a formal part of the curriculum, like it's being codified as such lately. Another thing that I want to mention here with respect to this is an article in BuzzFeed. This came out an hour ago, and interesting, it talks about code switching. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar, code switching is this, I'm going to call it a mental phenomena. A mental phenomena where people speak different ways in front of different audiences. And this is something I know to be true. My children have pointed it out. They say, Dad, whenever you're with your friends that you grew up with, that you went to high school with, you guys all talk the same. And we literally, I think, all revert back to our, adolescent selves and use that slang and we're that, you literally become a teenager again. And I think that's normal. I think it's pretty normal. And this code switching happens with folks in the queer community, too. It also happens with Spanish speakers as well, who, there's a lot of memes on social media that say, me at work, I'm very corporate, and they show them, being very professional, super polished. And they said, the minute I start speaking Spanish, I become a different person. and that's largely true, I think, for people who immerse themselves in a culture that, is built on party and family and food and dancing and all of that. So, oftentimes you can't really speak that loudly if you're in a room full of people that are not speaking Spanish. You can't just come in and be like, oye, pero ¿qué te pasa? Right? That's just something you would do with a bunch of your Puerto Rican friends, right? So I get, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And I guess that's the Rich Valdez definition of code switching. But this article here, it says why LGBTQ plus people are still code switching at work. And I would think that makes a ton of sense in the world. Why wouldn't they? But here's the reasoning. It says in many professional spaces, there's an assumption of straight and cis as the default. And so queer people can feel like they're making a big statement when they're simply expressing themselves. But it shouldn't be that way. That's according to the author here in BuzzFeed, Megan Liscomb. Now, this is, of course, one of the many articles that are out there because of Pride Month. But the gist of it here is that if you work in corporate America, you might also realize that your social media can affect what you do. And having a company logo with rainbow colors and a company that pats itself on the back for being an ally can be a good thing in today's day and age. However, there isn't enough acceptance of queer people in the workplace. That's the argument that they're making here. They're saying politically, Republican legislators in several states have banned gender-affirming care for transgender youth. Oh, shoot. My computer froze. And with that, ultimately what happens is it's frozen. But the point it's making is it's saying that gay people are not safe or free to be gay in their workplace, so therefore they're forced to act cis or straight. And I would think this is a matter of professionalism, in my humble opinion. I think one can, like I just said, I can be loud and speak in Spanish all I want, but I don't do that on the radio every day because there's a job I have to do here. If I were with my friends or at a family party, I definitely behave a different way. And I think that's the same way. If you're a gay person that's out with all your gay friends, you want to, dress flamboyantly, speak flamboyantly and whatnot, go right ahead on your own time. But while you're working, keep it professional. And I guess I would argue to say it's not necessarily professional to be over the top flamboyant, and it's almost a distraction. All right. At least that's my thought. Forgive me if I'm offending anyone. RuPaul, if you're listening, I apologize in advance. But that's the story here in BuzzFeed about why gay people are code switching at work. Now, I want to talk to the author of a book called False Flag: Why Queer Politics Mean the End of America. And we're going to do that straight ahead with Joy Pullman. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, you've heard that chant before. That was from a parade about a year ago, right, last summer. And they were chanting, "We're here, we're queer, and we're coming for your children." And that seems to be the belief on these streets, right, that this agenda is not just for people to express themselves, but they're here to take over your family, your child's life, your child's mind. And this book, False Flag: Why Queer Politics Mean the End of America by Joy Pullman, has a really good description to it. Pride used to be a sin. Now it's the flag of occupation. In this book, Joy Pullman shows how radical ideologues and sexual revolutionaries, like Alfred Kinsey and his acolytes, I presume, captured local school boards, major corporations, and the Democrat Party, as well as the federal government. And that's a true statement if I've ever heard one. Joy Pullman, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Tell me why you decided to write a book on this movement and what the impetus was. I'm sure you were sitting pretty as executive editor at the Federalist and didn't need to write a book. And if you were going to write a book, you could have written about anything, but you decided to write about something that will considerably bring you a lot of heat. Why?
Well, it's funny that you say that because that's actually true. So 1 year ago, I wrote an essay for the Federalist about, during Pride Month, and the publisher asked me to write this book based on the essay. So I wasn't looking to go into this heat-seeking sort of topic, but I thought, that's something I can do. And I also felt like people are scared to speak out about this topic, and I have a position in which I can do it. And my employer is a free speech place, so at least professionally, I knew that I could do that in a way that other people could not. And so I thought, therefore, it was kind of my duty to do that on behalf of people who really are sanctioned for speaking out in this country. I know that many people feel like their job, their social standing, maybe their family relationships, things like that, might be at risk simply for, having some questions about, for example, the clip you just played about, chants at pride marches such as groom, 10% is not enough, referring to the percentage of people, adults currently identifying as LGBT. So, there's a lot of problems happening, when there happens to be a social movement that no one can question for any reason. Right. Tends to, if there's no kind of accountability or ability to question, then things can fester and get very ugly. And there's unfortunately, some things like that I talk about in this book, because if other people don't speak out, at least I can, and it really is needed in order to, frankly, protect not just children, but the rest of society.
Again, folks, our guest is Joy Pullman from the Federalist. She's executive editor, and she's the author of this book. It comes out June 18th. I recommend getting a copy for yourself and one for a friend. Pre-order it now. False Flag, Why Queer Politics Mean the End of America. And Joy Pullman, I look at the title, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I would say it seems like a provocative, very heavy title. Clearly, I don't think you're the type to do that just for having a good title. I think that there's a belief that you feel that this is the undoing of the country.
No, you're right. And I actually do go on to make the argument for that in the book. And part of the reason I think I can justify such a strong title is that it is true that identity politics, which is the system of government that, all these queer so-called anti-discrimination laws and all the rest rest on, they are a complete rejection of the American Constitution and the way of life that is required to uphold it. So in my book, I go through kind of two major arguments related to that. The first one is natural rights constitution based. And so I show how you cannot really have we right now have two competing systems of government in the United States, the identity politics system of government and the a pre-existing natural law constitution-oriented system of government. They're coexisting, but one is getting stronger than the other, that identity politics constitution. And I write in the book and I show how I go through actually all of the 10 bills, items in the Bill of Rights, as well as numerous other natural rights that our American founders believed were core to the system of government. And I show how identity politics laws erase all of those items in the Bill of Rights. One by one, if you substitute fake rights, if you substitute anti-discrimination law for natural law-based, law, you are going to you can't have both. You can have one or the other. And we're having more of a totalitarian identity politics sort of system, which, by the way, descended from communist nations. I write about that in the book. So we're leaning more towards this identity politics constitution, and it's erasing our old one, the ones that many Americans know that they should have and that our system of government should secure to them and don't have. But then the second thing I talk about there is how, frankly, sexual chaos destroys people's ability to be self-governing. So the American system of government is unique in world history in that it requires citizens basically to run their own affairs. But the problem with that is if you grew up in a chaotic home, if you do not grow up in the home where your own two biological parents stay married together for life and commit themselves, for the children's benefit, the old traditional, form of marriage, the enduring
nuclear
form
family.
Of it. That's right. And then children really, they lose, from that biological family, they gain a sense of identity, and without it, they really have major struggles. I mean, everyone's aware of the fact that, children who don't have their mother and father together in their lives throughout their childhood, they have more anxiety, depression, higher rates of crime, higher unemployment, list every single social ill, and it's much higher among children who did not grow up in their two-parent married home. And so I write about, I give the evidence, the research, the backing to show that, homes that are not like that, which is what the queer revolution pushes and destroys, basically create people who are not going to be running their own lives capably. They're going to need government intervention more and more and more and more because, they don't have self-restraint, self-control, and self-direction in their lives on average. And therefore, it's kind of the family situation creates instability and chaos that creates a demand for more government in people's lives interfering with their natural rights to run their own lives.
So, Joy Pullman, we are replacing liberty with intersectionality and chaos. I think you're onto something. Folks, we're coming right back with Joy Pullman. She's author of the book False Flag, Why Queer Politics Mean the End of America. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Joy Pullman, author of False Flag, Why Queer Politics Mean the End of America. And Joy, what can readers expect to take away from the book?
Oh my, honestly, there's so many things, and that's why it's actually a book instead of an article. I talk about how the DEI and the rainbow revolution that we are experiencing today actually began with the progressives 100 years ago, and it began actually to be entrenched in federal administrative agencies in the 1960s and 70s. So it's not just starting today. It's been going on for a long time, and there are things that lawmakers could do to stop it if they so choose. I talk about how feminism actually is what led to transgenderism and the connections there with the rejection of, the givenness of the human body and the fact that men and women are different. And that has a lot of implications for family life and society. I go through and talk about actually the connections that are growing and alarming between the queer movement and pedophilia. There's now something called minor attracted persons, which is a new name for pedophiles. There's some very dark and shocking stuff there, but I do think people need to talk about it for the protection of children. California just, for example, reduced its age of consent laws so that now, people can have sex with someone as young as 14 with no felony consequences. That's something that actually is on the political program, for pedophiles in Germany, so. And I also talk about the connections between actual communists, card-carrying members, philosophers of communism, and today's queer movement. So I think there's a lot of drawing connections and giving people the background to understand the context of what is going on here and why it's really not all about love and rainbows. That is just PR propaganda. There's some dark things that are happening here, and we do have to talk about it again. Because creating legal protections for minor attracted persons, I think, is what precisely zero voters think that they're getting out of all this.
Wow. Folks, grab 2 copies of the book, False Flag, Why Queer Politics Mean the End of America by Joy Pullman. She's executive editor at the Federalist, Federalist.com. Check them out. Joy Pullman, you are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot. Thanks for being here tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me so much.
My pleasure. Folks, Open Phone America is coming up straight ahead. You know the number, 833-4-VALDEZ. I'll be there. Hope you're there, too. Looking forward to your calls. I'm Rich Valdez.
From the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 3 of the program. Happy to be here with you. This is the Tuesday night edition of the program. If you want to join us, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, you want to insult me, whatever the case is. I may not be very nice to you, but I'm still looking forward to chatting with you, if you want to insult me, of course. And I want to talk about a few things. One of the things I've been wanting to comment on, and I don't know if we have the audio or not, and I don't know if it would even help you. It's really just kind of music in the background. But it's a video of Joe El Baboso Biden and Que Mala Eres. And Joe Biden's face is so puffy. He looks like he's had a Botox filler overload on his face. He's got this grin that doesn't look like it comes off of his face. And everybody is jamming and grooving next to him, listening to some music. And he is literally frozen. Very rigid, showing very strong signs of rigidity. And again, I went through this with my dad. My dad had this as a result of having a traumatic brain injury and something called TBI-related dementia. And in fact, when he would tense up like that, the neurologist told me that these were, in fact, small seizures related to the brain injury. That's kind of how he just responded to them, was by freezing, and then after 5 or 10 minutes, he would just kind of relax, but he would be totally spaced out. And that's exactly how Joe Biden looks to me. Now, of course, I'm not a doctor, so I do get to share my experiences and observations because I'm not bound by any type of American Medical Association or anything like that. But I want to get your thoughts on that if you saw that video, and I'm talk a little bit more about it in a little bit. I also want to talk about the way that they're treating Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito, people trying to get him on undercover video and whatever. And listen, I get that. I worked for Project Veritas for a while. I understand how the game works. Everybody's fair game, understood. But the question is what they're trying to roast him on here. It's not something you should roast anybody for. We're going to play that audio in a little bit. But in effect, they're going after him because of his religious beliefs. And something I want to jump into right now is all of these videos that at least I've been seeing on social media of groups of what the media will call pro-Palestinian protesters. But these are not pro-Palestinian protesters. They're not protesting anything. They're just attacking people and accosting people and intimidating people and bullying people. And honestly, it's sick. It's really disgusting to see this happen. And I want to direct your attention to a quote. And the quote that I'm looking for, I got it right here. I will have it. But first, we'll play the audio, then we'll get to the quote. Right. There is earlier today, I looked at a text message from my buddy Curtis Sliwa. And he showed me something that happened on the New York City subway last night. And it's a bunch of people getting on the subway. And they make these like threats, in effect. Threats. And I thought, man, this is horrible. And it had to do with people being Jewish, or at least supporting a Jewish state. So I sent it over to the great one, Mark Levin, my other radio mentor. And he retweeted what I tweeted out, and then he played it on his show, and I think we have a little clip of that. Listen to this.
They're so focused on other things, Trump and hating Israel and all the rest. I want you to listen to something that took place, that was sent to me by my buddy Rich Valdez, a wonderful radio host in his own right, that took place in a subway in Philadelphia recently. I mean, the last few days.
Now, this was actually not Philadelphia. It was New York City. But Mark is a Philly guy, so I can understand why he said that, because it also happened in Philly. But the video that I believe that we have is one from New York. But again, similar situation. Listen to what they said.
Raise your hands if you're a Zionist. Raise your hands if you're a Zionist. Raise your hands if you're a Zionist. This is your chance to get out. This is your chance to get out. Okay, no Zionists, we're good. Woo! No Zionists here.
Now, again, this may sound innocent and innocuous, but think of this. Crowded subway car. You're coming home from work. All of a sudden, at whatever stop, the train doors open up. Boom, boom. Right? If you've been to New York, you know when the train doors open, that sound goes off. And a bunch of people wearing this keffiyeh, that headscarf thing, their faces are wrapped like ninjas. You can't see them. And they just, from every door of the train, I don't know, 25 people get on. Young people, dressed like for war, honestly. They look like they were, wearing army fatigues, army jackets, that type of thing. And these keffiyeh head wraps with the checkered scarf type of thing. They get on and they start shouting at the people on the train, saying, are there any Zionists in here? People look at them like they're crazy. They shout again, are there any Zionists in here? Then they look at each other and they say, all right, there's no Zionists. Okay, good, because this is your chance to get off. My chance to get off, or what? Now, thankfully, nobody took the bait to call them out on their nonsense, because these don't look like the toughest people in the world, but there's strength in numbers. I'm sure 25 geeky, nerdy, skinny people are going to give you a run for your money, no matter how good you fight, how strong you are. The point is, nobody should have to live this way. Another video I saw, same thing. People are in their homes. They look outside a residential neighborhood, and there's people in these headscarves and whatnot, and they're outside, and they're saying they're patrolling the community. When they're not patrolling, they're doing protests right in front of your house, accosting people as they're walking their dogs and checking their mail. This is not what they call peaceful protest. This is not even one's First Amendment right, honestly. Right? The public square is not my front lawn. Maybe my sidewalk, but not the front lawn. These people were all up on people's property. The subway, I get it. That can be the public square. But you don't get to harass and intimidate and bully people. Right? We've seen people, pro-life people, go to jail for praying for people outside of an abortion clinic. So you're not going to tell me that you're allowed to get in somebody's face and threaten them on a New York City subway car, or a Philly subway car, or any subway car anywhere. But that's what's going on. This fear, bullying, and intimidation by these very sick, Jew-hating individuals. That has to stop. I grew up in Brooklyn. There was something called the Crown Heights riots. And we don't want that to come back. People always ask me whenever I bring up the fact that the Jews in Brooklyn had the JDL, the Jewish Defense League, Shamrim. They have, their own protection. This is why. Because there's been attacks on Jews forever and a day. Not something that they're necessarily unaccustomed to. And it's sad, and it's a shame. Anyway, I'm going to get your reaction to that as well when we come back. The phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
The other resolution that they were pushing was a complete AIPAC written resolution. And one of the first lines was, condemn Hamas for this unprovoked attack. And I stopped reading at that point. I'm like, well, if we're calling this an unprovoked attack, that means we're going to ignore 18 human rights organizations calling Israel an apartheid state. And we're going to ignore 75 years of military occupation, which is illegal, or 700,000 settlers expanding into the West Bank, which is also illegal. Now, I am not justifying the killing of civilians by Hamas on October 7th. There's no justification. It's just an explanation of what the circumstances were that led to October 7th. And I believe then, and I believe now, if you want to end extremism, we need a free Palestine. So don't talk to me about, two-state solution when we're not doing anything to build a Palestinian state.
That is Congressman Jamal Bowman. He was on a program called Forward yesterday, saying he opposed this resolution condemning Hamas because it called October 7th an unprovoked attack. And of course, you just heard it. He said, I'm not going to agree that they responded the right way, but I just can't say it was unprovoked. Are you kidding me, sir? So you're going to say because there are these settler groups or whatever the list of offenses, he mentioned 3 things, none of them equated to slitting the throats of babies and setting those babies on fire, kidnapping grandma and your teenage daughter and holding them hostage for 6 months. Right? Yeah, that's what I thought. Of course not. Absolute insanity. Absolute insanity. That's Jamal Bowman. He is a radical that literally openly supports Hamas. I mean, that's as tacit an endorsement as you can get. I'm trying to find the right words here, because shocks me honestly that he could say, I'm not going to support a resolution condemning Hamas, who's killed small children, as if we were all supposed to look past that, who's holding hostages. One of those hostages, I don't know, 3 years old, little baby. And they want to turn around, but you've killed, the IDF has killed this, and the Jews have killed that. Listen, you can't go and burn people's children, attack a music festival, kidnap girls. Show me the videos. Show me the videos of Israeli soldiers or citizens going and kidnapping people from Gaza. I've never seen a single video of that. People send me videos all the time of Israeli soldiers getting into fights with people, of Israeli soldiers getting into gunfire and shooting at people. But I've yet to see just a private citizen from Israel go and grab a Palestinian woman and steal her, kidnap her, and set a baby on fire. I've yet to see that. I have seen some of the collateral damage, which is brutal and difficult to watch. Nobody wants to see carnage. But this is incomparable. Anyway, that is Jamal Bowman. And these people, they are radicals. Now you've got this Hamas group. They have, and I'm going to get to your calls momentarily. Bear with me. They've done all of this crazy. Then on top of that crazy, pre-existing crazy, you've never heard me or anyone else, I think, make the reference that we should put the Hamas people in ovens the way Hitler put the Jews in ovens, right? I've never called for that because I don't think that's appropriate. But you've got some protesters in New York City. I got a clip of this one. This is a doozy. He says to a group of Jews, I wish Hitler was still here. Listen to this.
Well, yeah, killing people. You have nothing better to do. I wish Hitler was still here. Go home. I wish Hitler was still here. He would have wiped all y'all out.
I wish Hitler was still here. He would have wiped all of y'all out. Unreal. Honestly, unreal. Now, this quote, and then we're getting to your calls. This is an article from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Latest developments here. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, who masterminded Hamas's October 7th atrocities, portrayed the deaths of Palestinian civilians as a welcome sacrifice, quote, in his personal correspondence. The Wall Street Journal revealed this on June 10th. The journal reviewed dozens of messages authored by Sinwar in which the terror leader hailed the carnage in Gaza. In one letter sent to Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh, Haniyeh, on April 11th, Sinwar wrote that the Palestinian death toll would infuse life into the veins of this nation, prompting it to rise to its glory and honor. In another message to Hamas leaders in Qatar, Sinwar maintained that thousands of civilian casualties, listen to this, quote, are necessary sacrifices, end quote. The messages also suggest that Sinwar is banking on the idea that further fighting will, quote, work to his advantage, end quote. That's according to the Wall Street Journal, regarding the ongoing ceasefire talks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This man believes that hiding hostages and terrorists amongst civilians in Gaza, in Rafah, are necessary sacrifices. Killing women and children, putting them in harm's way, using them as human shields, is a necessary sacrifice. This man is disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. All right, let's see. Where do we go here? I want to go to, let's see. Yeah, we have 2 minutes, I think. Minute and a half. Frank, Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC. Go right ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you about Hunter Biden, but Jamal Bowman came up. If you say he's crazy, how about those 3 human rights organizations that say the same thing? And also, do you know who Baruch Goldstein was? And do you know that there was a shrine to him in Israel?
No.
You do?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't know who Baruch Goldstein was?
No.
Well, he was a doctor from the United States who machine gunned something like 40 Arabs while they were at prayer. And of course, he was disowned by Israel, by the government anyway, but there was a shrine to Baruch Goldstein set up in Israel. And that's the difference. Look, I'm not taking sides. It's a horrible situation there.
Sure.
But those 3 human rights organizations do have something to say, and I think Jamal Bowman did a pretty good job of stating the case.
Well, here's what I'll say. I mean, I think I can draw some parallels here. I think there are statues of Robert E. Lee all over the place, and in my opinion, I think he was a traitor. Many think he's one of the greatest military tacticians to ever live. As far as this Baruch character, good on Israel for disowning him. I don't think we should be applauding that type of thing. But clearly there are people that don't like the other side. And that's a fact that we have to deal with on both sides of this. Frank, I wish I had more time. Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC. We'll be right back. I'm Rich Valdez.
Best head of hair in live late night radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez. Call now 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And before the break, we were having a good discussion with Frank, WCBC. And he raised some points, and I didn't have a chance to really speak to all of them. But I just wanted to say, with respect to the human rights organizations, oftentimes I will discount out of hand what many of these organizations have to say, because oftentimes they're extensions, entities, tentacles of the United Nations, who I have great disdain for having spent a year or two as part of the United Nations Association in a volunteer capacity as a congressional liaison. I once worked for a congressman in New Jersey, and I volunteered for this role and did it, and realized how, we don't really need to advocate for the UN because the UN is busy advocating for itself, getting a massive amount of funding from the United States, amongst other countries, and then being pretty much sold out to the Chinese and others. Iran has some sway every now and again, where they're able to, or really just the collective amount of anti-Jewish sentiment. So it's kind of like the enemy of my enemy becomes my friend. And after you see all that kind of materialize, it's very ugly. And, when it comes to these humanitarian organizations, the one that comes to mind for me is UNRWA, right? The UNRWA. And that was the quote-unquote nonpartisan humanitarian group that was helping the folks in Gaza that we later found out was actually helping the terrorists. And that was a big deal. All right, we may have forgotten, and maybe I don't have that clip to play today. I played it 2 months ago or 3 when that news broke. But I can tell you that when you have these humanitarian groups, or so they claim to be, but they're really actively assisting in the October 7th massacre, it really calls into question how much I can believe the other groups with accusations when they're ultimately all the same. Now, I also will say, even if the accusation is founded, and I'm not saying that it is, but if they're saying that, these Jewish groups are settling in Gaza and taking over Palestinian land, that's not an act of the Israeli government. That's not an act of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. These are not official acts. These are people doing what they do. And if you want to have animosity towards someone for doing something like that, okay, I understand. There's courts, there's a million things you can do, not the least of which, not even in the least, is going and burning infant children, slitting their throats, kidnapping young women, and raping them, and old women as well. These are things you don't do, right? These are things that barbarians once did, right? And rape and pillage. We're going to take your women and watch your daughters. And I understand the threat. I do. But what I'm saying is, it's difficult to trust a lot of these humanitarian organizations because there's so many of them that are in the tank against Israel. And Bowman's comments against AIPAC, AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, they seem to be hated by just a group of people. They're a lobbying group like any other. They're just probably more effective and have deeper pockets. But somehow they're hated, really hated. You say AIPAC and a lot of people, their blood starts to boil. And I think the reason is because there's a lot of people that just don't like Israel, don't like the idea of a Jewish state. And there's some that say, hey, the Jews can exist. I just happen to not like Netanyahu. I happen to not like Israel. There's people that feel that way. I don't particularly feel that way, but I know that there are people out there. There's also a good contingent of people that have bought into Nazi philosophy, and they sympathize with those talking points. So they think that, for example, the election of this woman, I don't want to mispronounce her name, the president-elect of Mexico, and I'm trying to look up her name real quick, and she is now the target of a lot of people saying things about her ethnicity, questioning things like saying, Mexico's 80% Catholic. How is it that they elect a woman that's not Mexican, not Catholic, and is a socialist? Now, listen, I would ask the same question. I'm not saying that they had a free and fair election. They're saying they had one. I'm not necessarily in agreement. I don't know all the facts. But Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo, she's a former head of government in Mexico City. She's now the president-elect. She's not very popular, but she won. And there are some people that, were in opposition to her that mysteriously died. And there's lots of stories out there. My point is, lots of people have bought into this saying, there's yet another person of Jewish faith, secular Jew, that is in charge. And there are people out there that believe that, the secular Jews are the epitome of everything bad. Right? And this is Nazi thinking, right? And their friends in Hamas promote that type of thinking. And they think, the Jews run Hollywood, they run the banking system, they run this, they run that. They're in charge of everything bad in the world. They're in charge of all the money. They want you to be broke. And while there may be some bad people that believe those things that happen to be Jews, that's not the be-all and end-all of every Jew. It's just not the case. Just like there are Christians that go and bomb abortion clinics. I've never met a Christian that bombed an abortion clinic. I've met plenty of Christians. So my point is, you can't always believe the hype. And I think there's a lot of that hype that goes into these things, especially when you have people like UNRWA that are claiming to be humanitarian organizations that are really actively helping Hamas. So that was what I wanted to say to Frank, who had to go. But I wanted to get to your calls as well. Now, something else I wanted to point out, Hunter Biden, right? Hunter Biden, we have a clip from Andrew Weissman from MSNBC. I'll play that for you in a little bit, as well as that Pelosi. But Weissman says that Joe Biden is the embodiment of the rule of law, and I couldn't help but laugh at that. I want to get some reaction to that. Let's go to Joe, Salem, Arkansas, KSAR. Joe, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Yeah, Rich, I hadn't got to talk to you in a while. I'm glad you're back.
Thank you, sir. Good to hear your voice.
Oh, well, thank you. Since you brought up women in cars again, a few nights ago I didn't get in, but I wanted to speak to. I believe you thought that the ladies are more interested in safety in the automobiles, therefore they get their cars serviced more often and such. Well, the problem is I've known a lot of mechanics, and they'll admit to the men behind closed doors that they make twice as much money on the ladies because they can talk them into things that they don't even need.
Yep. Yeah, and that's really what I was talking about that time that I mentioned that, was that I always told my kids, don't ever go to a mechanic by yourself, my two daughters. And even my girlfriend, I should say my ex-girlfriend now, she, I tell her the same thing. Don't go there by yourself because they're going to try and get you. That's what they do. And it's because my wife, my ex-wife, her brother, my ex-brother-in-law, he was a manager at a big chain mechanic place. And the things he used to tell me, all I do is look at them and go, yeah, no, you don't have to do it today. No, I found a couple of things. And then he would just casually go, you're not putting kids in the car, right? And when they go, yeah, no, I am. And he would only ask that if he saw a car seat. And when they would say, oh, yeah, no, I have two kids there, he'd go, oh, well, you might want to do it sooner rather than later. I wouldn't put my kids in that car. And once he said that, they were applying for the store credit card if they didn't have enough of a line of credit on their own credit card, and they were making whatever repairs they needed to make.
Yeah, my first wife, I sent her down to get the air conditioning charged up in her car. I thought she could get that done. I even called the guy ahead. And he sent her away because he says, you don't need air conditioning worse than you need new tires. And until you buy some new tires, I'm not going to charge your air conditioning.
What is he, with Hamas, this mechanic? Unbelievable.
I took it to another guy. I said, forget that. We're not putting up with that. And my dad taught me when I started driving on these back roads of Arkansas, he taught me that, he says, I'm gonna tell you something right now. You keep asking why your mom don't drive and don't have a license. He says, women, you're going to find this out, women in cars don't mix, son. And and she never did drive until they got divorced, But the thing about it is, if a male member of the family that's kind of astute on mechanics and stuff, takes care of his own stuff, just goes with the mother, the daughter, the wife, whatever, well, then a lot of that won't happen like that and all that extra expense. Now, Enough said there. I was going to tell you about Hunter Biden now.
Sure. Well, let me just chime in on that part before we move on to Hunter Biden, because I think you're right. And what I'm going to say, I might catch some heat for, But I do believe that's part of your duty, right? As a man, as a father, as a son, as whatever role you are in this world. Women, in my opinion, were not built to do the things that men are supposed to do. And you can fill in the blank on whatever those things are. It doesn't mean they can't do them, right? I think women, I know a girl that used to change her own oil. I know, women that drive trucks. I'm not saying they're not capable. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying when it comes to certain things, right, there are things that are easier done by a man because you're kind of genetically wired for certain things. And I think these types of things are part of that. Maybe I'm wrong in my thinking. Maybe that's my old school mentality. But my point is, I don't fault women for this, right? I'm not going to ever argue with one of my kids and go, I can't believe you went to the freaking mechanic and you let him get you for that much money. I'm not, because I know that they have a maternal nurturing instinct where they're thinking, I want to make sure the car is safe. I want to make sure the car is sound. I want to make sure the tires are good, the brakes are good. And they're not going to gamble with their family's life, where I think men, may have a different understanding of mechanics than women do, and also aren't led emotionally, tend to be logical thinkers. And that's why men and women, I think, make such a good team, because you have, two different visions, right? An emotional vision and a vision that's based on emotionality. Now, Joe, I want to quickly get your thoughts on Hunter Biden. Go right ahead.
Okay, these 3 charges on this little, what I understand is it was a 38 special. Now, in this part of the country, if he's dealing with drug dealers, he must have really been on drugs, and he must be dumb, because, if he ever got in a firefight with drug dealers, he needs high-capacity, large-caliber semi-automatics. And that's all anybody has around here, plus their long guns. And, that is ridiculous when there's all these heavy-duty crimes against our country going on.
Yeah, he's bringing a 6-shooter to a big gunfight with the drug dealers. So I'm going to give you some perspective on that when I come back. I got to take a quick pause here. Joe in Salem, Arkansas, thanks for your call. And listen for this response. I'm going to share a story with you. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, I'm back. We continue with your phone calls. And what I wanted to share with the last caller was basically my brother, who shall remain nameless right now, was an NYPD cop and had locked up some bad guys. And long story short, they came to get him after they got out of jail. He was off duty, had a fanny pack with, this was back in the late 80s, a 38 special. He was able to kill one guy, shoot the other guy, get him into custody, and all of this while he was playing basketball at the local park on a Saturday morning. This was a complete ambush, and he survived. And it was a 38 special. They were both armed, but he was faster than they were with their, probably 380, semi-auto. And it goes to show you, sometimes that 6-shooter will save your life. And that was the point that I wanted to make. Anyway, I will continue with your calls. Let us go here to Ron, Council Bluffs, Iowa, KMA. Ron, go right ahead quickly.
Good evening, Rich. What I was going to tell you is that there was, and I can't remember all their names, but that El Fata, they said he was in some school in Germany, flew into one of the Twin Towers.
Oh.
And he was a Lebanese. Our sweethearts, the ones we hate. I'm all for Israel. I get out my flag and stick it up in my front yard.
Good for you. Yeah, I think, look, we need peace, right? What we need is peace in the Middle East, and we can't abandon the only ally we have that fights every fight that has to be fought in the Middle East. And I can't help but think when you have enemies like Iran that work by proxy, but they're vocal, right? They're very vocal, and they say things like death to Israel, death to America, death to the great Satan, death to the little Satan. So clearly, once they get rid of Israel, they're coming after us. That's their plan. This is why they're enriching the yellow cake uranium, because they want to have those long-range ICBM missiles that can reach Alaska, Hawaii, California, and potentially anybody else they want to get that is an American interest, which is right there in Israel. So these are serious situations that we're facing, and I'm with you. Israel can't stop until every last member of Hamas is disarmed and there is no longer a threat. Ron in Council Bluffs, Iowa, thank you for your call. Big shout out to KMA. Let's see, where do we go from here? We go to AOC. We have a clip of I don't want to do that just yet. We'll come back to the clip of AOC, and we'll go to Andrew and Clinton when we do that, because I know you had a comment on AOC. What I will do right here, quickly, is Michael in Pendleton, Oregon on KUMA. Michael, go right ahead.
Rich, great to talk to you. I'm on the day shift this week. I'm working 2 jobs to try to make ends meet. Good for you. But the second job's helping. Yeah, I know you have just limited time tonight. On my next call, I got a great rodeo story for you and about a bull. Next time I call in, I'll share that with you in America. Cool. I just wanted to say, I know last week you talked about D-Day. My dad was there, D-Day invasion, Utah Beach, Master Sergeant. I want to salute everyone who was there, who is still a survivor, all the relatives of the fellows that fought over there, and the women too. A comment, I think it's tragic what's happened with the Trump trial. I don't want to see my Democratic colleagues in jail. I honestly, from my heart, I say that. They're my fellow Americans. I don't agree with all their positions.
Yeah, I think you're right. If we're going to be just as bad as what we claim the left is, then we're no better than them, and it's no alternative. There's no choice. So I agree with you. I want to thank your dad for his service. I want to thank you for your call and your kind words. You're always such a faithful listener, and I appreciate it. Michael in Pendleton, Oregon on KUMA. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
What happens to you if Donald Trump wins? What do you do? What's your first move?
I mean, it sounds nuts, but I wouldn't be surprised if this guy threw me in jail.
That's the voice of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, all out crazy. And she's on a podcast called On Kara Swisher. And, AOC was, she is my evil arch nemesis. I had a showdown with her back in 2018 at the New York City Puerto Rican Day Parade. And this weekend was the Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York City. I think her comments are crazy. And with seconds on the clock, let's go to Andrew in Clinton, Illinois, WHOW. Andrew, go ahead.
Good evening, as always, Mr. Valdez. It's great to hear your voice, and I love your show. And there's absolutely no possibility that Trump would have any reason to throw her in jail. She's ridiculous. But if you remember the last...
I don't think you go to jail for being ridiculous. Thanks for the call. Sorry that we're short on time. Paul in Boise, thank you for your kind words as well. And America, take care, good night, and God bless. Hasta la próxima. I am Rich Valdez. We're going to do it again tomorrow, God willing. Until then, check out the website, richvaldez.com, for all of our archived episodes and whatever's coming up on your local station. I'll see you tomorrow.